Today I wanted to do an experiment where I would use the motion data from my DJI Osmo Action 4 and use that to stabilize the video from the Sony A7IV IV. Again, both of them were 4. And for that I would be using Gyroflow, this amazing software that's free and it does a really good job at stabilizing with motion data. But as it turns out, the A7IV already records motion data within the video. So scrap this one. So then I will be comparing the active stabilization of the A7IV with IBIS and electronic stabilization enabled, and I'll be comparing that to like no stabilized video but using the motion data from the camera and Gyroflow, so to see which one is better. This one now is active stab, and this is how stable it is. It's also cropped in quite a lot. And this is now stabilized using Gyroflow. Now with Gyroflow, the cool thing is that you can actually adjust how stable you want the footage to be, and it actually does look better. However, there are a few things you have to be careful with. Now, one of these things is the shutter speed. If the shutter speed is too slow, you will get that ghosting and weird pulsing in the highlights when you stabilize the video, because as I said in many of my previous videos, if there's no stabilization, if there's no IBIS or optical stabilization while you're recording the video, then every time you shake the camera, that motion blur is going to be recorded. So recording with 1/50th of a second is probably not going to be a good idea. Now that was a fun trip. I always enjoy going to Velika Planina to capture the B-roll shots for this channel, and if you're ever in Slovenia, make sure to check out Velika Planina. Just make sure you bring your hiking shoes. Now, one question that comes to mind is why use Gyroflow if Sony already has the Catalyst Browse software that does kind of the same thing? Well, there is one reason why I would recommend Gyroflow over that, and we'll talk about this in just a second, but let's pop in one of the videos and see how the stabilization actually works. So here we have one of the videos that was recorded with no IBIS, with no active stab, handheld, and the shutter speed was, I think, 1/500th of a second, and you can see it's quite shaky. But let's turn on the stabilizer. So with the stabilizer, it's almost like GoPro-like, and then without the stabilizer, this is how the video was actually recorded. Now if I turn the stabilizer on and I click here on this preview, you can see how the video is being stabilized. So the outer ring is the actual video, and then the smaller box, the little crop in, is the one that's kind of following the average motion, or just negating all of the motion data that was recorded with the A7IV. Now, in case you're wondering, the A7 III does not record motion data, the A7IV does, which is really amazing. Now, the reason why I recommend Gyroflow over the Catalyst Browse is over here. You can see the export settings. This video was recorded with the 4K All Eyes setting, which is the 250 megabits per second S-Log 3 10-bit 4:2 chroma subsampling, so it really doesn't get any better for internal recording. But if I was to use Catalyst Browse, I would export the video with less data. So this is the reason why Gyroflow is so much better, because here I can actually choose a ready-to-edit codec, so the DNX HR HQ or even HQX, which is 10-bit 4:2 chroma subsampling, and I can change the resolution or not, but I'm pretty much getting the stabilized video file that has all of the information that I need to then color grade in post-production, because this is a log picture profile. This is why it really looks this kind of desaturated and flat. So this is one reason why Gyroflow is really amazing. The second reason, for those DaVinci Resolve users, which I think are growing in the number, well, you can use Gyroflow within DaVinci Resolve as a plugin. So let's jump into DaVinci and I will show you how this looks. So here I have some videos that are already color graded, and I've added the labels so that we know which one is which. But this one, the first one, is IBIS active stab, 1/50th of a second shutter speed, and this is what the camera actually does. You know, without optical stabilization. I don't have an optical stabilized lens, but you know, it's stable, but it's not really stable. And you can see that, you know, the motion blur here in the back as I'm walking isn't that problematic. So now let's look at the video with no stabilization, recorded with that 1/50th of a second shutter speed, and you can see well, it's a lot more shaky. You can really notice how the camera is bumping up and down. And now let's apply Gyroflow. So here, if I go into Effects, Filters, I can type in here Gyro. I already have Gyroflow installed as a plugin. I'm gonna put this on. Now the whole instruction how to install this is in the website. It's very easy, so it's not a big deal. But once you apply this, it pops up here as an effect. Now you can use load the current file, and this is going to load the motion data from this file. Now it was recorded without IBIS, without active stay, because that would actually mess up the whole thing. So you need a non-stabilized video for this to work. But this is now stabilized with Gyroflow, and here I have a few settings that I can tweak. So if I want to make this look kind of the same as the one with the in-body stabilization, I figured that with this lens, you know, the 17mm Tamron, I just set 0.1 over here, and this is now going to kind of match the same framing, the same cropping, but it looks so much more stable. Now pay attention to the highlights here in the back and to these trees, how they are kind of, you know, becoming blurry and unblurry. Blurry, every time I take a step, they blur out, and this is again the 1/50th of a second shutter speed at its worst. But what happens if I use a higher shutter speed, let's say 1/200th of a second? Well, now if I use Gyroflow on this, you know, it looks pretty much, it looks like an action camera shot. And this is only the 0.1 smoothness. If I go to 0.5, it's going to crop in more, of course, but now it's like, you know, I'm flying through the air pretty much. And here you can also turn on the overlay, so the stabilization overlay, and this is how it actually works. You can see how much of the video was cropped away, but 0.1 now is just kind of the right amount. The problem, however, now is that I actually don't have any motion blur, because with that 1/200th of a second shutter speed, you know, the motion blur is pretty much gone. And here, if I pause the video, there's just a teeny tiny bit of motion blur, because 1/200th of a second still produces it, but it's nowhere near natural enough. And if you own DaVinci Resolve full studio version, well, then you can actually add motion blur in post, again with another effect. So open effects, filters, motion blur, grab this guy, put it over here, and now it pops under the Gyroflow. So first the video is stabilized without any, you know, shakiness in the highlights, and now I can apply motion blur. I figured it like 30, I always use 20 or 30 for my videos, and I'm just going to leave this at fast. This now has motion blur, as you can see. So if I zoom in over here and just turn it on, you can see how much motion blur is added, and it actually looks quite natural right now. It actually looks like a proper gimbal-like stabilization with that 1/50th of a second shutter speed. So this is a really big advantage if you have DaVinci Resolve Studio, because you can add a really high quality motion blur to your video. And one more thing before we get into the conclusion of this video, if you want to open this video file in Gyroflow, you can just click on it, go under Gyroflow, and here open in Gyroflow. So this video now opens in Gyroflow, and you can stabilize it here, and you can actually turn off stabilizer, turn on the stabilizer. But of course the video is not going to be color graded, because I've already done that in DaVinci Resolve on this clip over here. So final thoughts on this whole Gyroflow thing. I'm definitely going to use Gyroflow for my A7IV video recordings, and I'm not going to use IBIS and active stay. I'm just gonna turn this off like forever whenever I'm recording a video. It's good for photography, but for video, Gyroflow just, you know, it's so easy. It's not an extra step. There's just an effect you put on, and it's pretty much one click and you're done. And it's so much better than the original stabilization from the camera. These are my thoughts. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Hit the like button if you did. Consider subscribing if you're new. And if you have any comments or questions, leave that down below in the comment section. And if you want to stay on the channel and watch a few more videos, well, choose between one of these two. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stabilized.